So again, Philippe Lamberts, for those of you who joined, co-chair of the Greens in the European Parliament, not for the first time. Philippe, please, I won't be chairing, so I'm inviting Chloé Ridel, who's the national spokesperson for the French Socialist Party. Chloé will lead the conversation. Thank you for coming here, Chloé. We're very honored. Also, let me please invite Neil McInroy. Again, this is very much the conference is also a chance to bring together allies and friends of Europe are Patient, and I'm happy to call Neil such a person, helping us a lot with the projects we are doing in Polish core regions. Corinna Zierold, also coming to us from Brussels. Corinna is Senior Policy Advisor at IndustriAll, so a trade union organization which at the European level represents the interests of industrial workers, so an absolutely essential voice in any kind of discussion on EU climate and industrial policies. I assume that Piotr Ostrowski could not join us, so we have the full the panelists ready to discuss. So I'll leave it with you, Chloé, and I was really looking forward to this panel. I'm really happy that we'll have this kind of interaction. So without further delay, the mic is yours, Chloé.
Thank you very much. And I will try my best to pass on the mic and chair and lead this discussion on a very important topic, which is resumed as followed: avoiding the backlash towards EU climate policy. And when we talk about a backlash, this backlash is actually being seen in the European Parliament, and maybe Philippe, you will be talking about that better than I do. But we can see this backlash, and what is it? It's actually the coalition of the right and far-right groups in the European Parliament that are together actually to criticize European climate ambitions and to try to water them down. But there's also a backlash in member states through Europe, which can be seen electorally speaking. For example, in the Netherlands, where you had at the last elections this agricultural political party who managed to, score very high, and whose basic ideology is to refuse the ecological transition of agriculture in the Netherlands. So actually, why do we talk about the backlash? Is because of the ambition of the Green Deal, of the Green European Deal. But this ambition is actually based on scientific facts and on, the interest of the vast majority of people. So it's not about turning our back to this ambition. We have to keep this ambition because we don't have a choice. But it is about how we deliver the ambition, and this leads us to maybe discuss how to, avoid this backlash and make that the ecological transition be as swift as possible. And there is going to be a panel after about the EU international climate policy. But I just want to say that when we speak about our climate ambition, we are 2 weeks ahead of the COP. And the UN just published studies showing that actually we are not on track to respect the Paris Agreement. And that if you analyze all the commitments taken by the states, by the governments throughout the world, you can see that those commitments will make that we will reduce our carbon emission by 2% in 2030, whereas if we wanted to respect the Paris Agreement, we would need to reduce them by 47%. So the gap is huge. And we also know that throughout the world, you have more than 400 carbon bombs. It's how we call that. It's actually projects of fossil fuel extraction, right? That will emit each of them more than 1 billion CO2 emission equivalent. And this tells you about the urgency to not lose our ambition and to be bolder than ever. But how to avoid this backlash? Maybe I will make 2 brief points before I pass on the mic. I think that to avoid this backlash, there is one very important thing to have in mind is fairness. Fairness. Then it's the role of public power, of the state, but not only. And maybe also industry. When we talk about fairness regarding ecological transition, I don't talk about transition. The left in French doesn't talk about transition. We talk about bifurcation. I don't know how to say it in English, but bifurcation, right? Because it's a new world we have to build. When we talk about fairness, is first to say that social inequality and ecological injustices or other environmental injustices are, linked, because we know that the richest are those who pollute the most, whereas the poorest of the people are those who pollute less, and who suffer the most from the consequences of the pollution. So the ecological transition is very much about how we can close the gap of social inequalities as well. And you have to ensure that everybody pay its fair share. We know that it will cost a lot of money, to go towards carbon neutrality in Europe. The ECB has, numbers about that. We have to invest 500 billion euros per year, each year, until 2030. So it's a lot of money. We can have this money, but the question is, who will pay? Who will pay? Not the poorest one. And the rich and the multinational and the big companies have to pay their fair share, and this is why the Socialist, in Europe, for the next European election, we suggest to create, European tax on wealth. And if we tax dedicated to ecological bifurcation, and if we tax the 0.5% of the richest people in Europe, we would bring 200 billion euro per year. So half of what we need for the whole continent to go towards carbon neutrality. So fairness is very important. Then we have also to organize, to plan, and the role of public power is, of utmost importance regarding this, because we know that private companies, will not change by their own, okay? Because we are asking some of their companies just to destroy their business. Some companies will have to change or disappear. Okay, I will take the example of Total Energy, which is one of the biggest oil companies in the world, and which is a French company. For a long time, this company said, okay, we will invest in renewables, don't worry. But what they do now is that they keep on investing in new fossil fuel project extraction all over the world. So we need a public power capable of imposing, redistributing, taxing, whatever, you know, but we cannot believe that the market will on its own, you know, lead us to carbon neutrality. This is just false. And when we speak about carbon bombs, what we can do is to prevent the funding of those projects, fossil fuels projects, because we know that banks are funding them. So at the European level, we could actually prevent the funding of terrorism. We did that. Why could we not prevent the funding of massive fossil fuel projects who hamper the future of humanity? So the role of public is really important, and I will finish by saying a word about industrial policy in Europe. We know that there are huge opportunities for green industry, right? We need to produce renewables, we need to do a circular industry, to do some recycling, to produce some materials to the refitting of our houses, etc., etc. This will bring a lot of green jobs. But what we see now is that actually a lot of our green industry is made in China. And you know, there will not be a European ecology without a European green industry. We cannot keep on importing from China our solar panels. Okay, we import the majority of the European solar panels from China, where they are produced through with carbon, because 75% of Chinese electricity is made with charbon, coal, okay? And they come to us with fossil fuel by boat, right? So it's an absurdity. So we need to have a green European industry for batteries, for electric vehicles, for solar panels, for everything. And for this, we have to protect our markets. Period. You know, we have to be bold, but if we don't bring those jobs here in Europe, yes, there will be a backlash at some point. This is also part of the problem. So I will stop there. Sorry if I've been a bit long, but speaking English is not, you know, easy for me, so it takes time. Who wants to talk first? Do you want? Because you're by my side and you're okay. So I'll pass on the mic to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll be very, very quick. Hello, I'm Neil McInroy. I'm the global lead for community wealth building at the Democracy Collaborative. We're a US-based think tank based in DC, but I'm not a US citizen. I'm a Scottish citizen. I'm a Scot, so I'm delighted to be here. Well, we're in a fix, aren't we? We've got a big problem, haven't we? We've got a big problem. We're not going fast enough. We're not going strong enough in terms of the climate catastrophe, and we need to find a fix quickly. And I think part of the problem here is about wealth and power, neoliberalism, and its tentacles into democracy. Our democracies are failing us. Democracy is poor. Yeah, it's not working. So us as a think tank think we need to actually think about what we can do and who do we work with, which is both. It's both reforming democracy and reforming the economy at the same time. We need to have economic and democratic system change. Now, I'm not belittling the power of national governments or supranational governments, but I don't think the energy's there. I think there's lots of fine words, but there's delusional elements to this. I don't believe the real energy is there. The real energy is in the horizontal power of activism, the horizontal power there's lots of great stuff happening out there, yeah? People know what the answers are. It's just not going fast enough, it doesn't have enough resources, and it's not being amplified by democracy aligned to neoliberal power who doesn't really want those changes because it takes wealth and power off them. So we need to start to pivot. We need to create, and Mayor Burnham was correct, I think, we need to decentralise and we need to harness the energy that's in our localities. In this fine city, as I say, the people will be doing buzzy, entertaining, fantastic things that foreshadow the bigger change. All around us, there is modules of experiments, but I would argue that formal auspices of government are not seeing them. So we need to amplify and scale them. I see horizontal power needs to be created into the vertical power. We need to change economy and democracy. There's I think an English philosopher who said that it's easier to see the end of the world than it is to the end of capitalism. Mark Fisher. Is it, sorry? Slovenian. Okay, sorry. Yeah, easier to see the end of the world than it is the end of capitalism. Now just think, get your head around that. I think it's true. We kind of think, oh, doom and gloom, but we're not challenging capitalism, and that needs to be clearly challenged. So what we have, and very quickly, Chloé, what we have with the Democracy Collaborative is a thing called community wealth building. And this is an economic system change model that harnesses local energy, that creates different economic strategy, that looks to build new approaches to our industry and our economy. Now, this is not fanciful. We're doing it in Chicago. We're doing it in Somerville, in Boston. We're doing it in Scotland. Amsterdam have taken up the mantle on this. Preston in England's doing it. There's a number of locations who actually, what it takes is political leadership plus a grassroots activism that's saying, hold on a moment, this is not working. We need to think fundamentally different about our economic strategy, and how do we think about wealth and where wealth flows to, and how do we actually create the economic system change that deals with climate catastrophe. I've had some really interesting conversations in Wielkopolska here in Poland around the European Union just transition movement. Now, we need to move away from coal and fossil fuels. This is a great opportunity to not just have a conversation with workers and industry, but actually think about a whole new economy in itself, yeah? An economy in which we have more economic democracy. And I'll finish on this point. We've talked a lot in the social contract across Western liberal democracies about redistribution. You've heard the oxymoronic term, I'm sure, inclusive growth. Inclusive growth. That is oxymoronic. It's ridiculous. We cannot create growth that's inclusive by the very nature of growth. So we need to think through about how do we degrowth? How do we not have growth? And it's not just about redistribution of wealth. It's about pre-distribution of wealth. And that is where economic democracy come in, and we bring back the idea that the economy is something that we own, we construct, and we have a stake in. That is what we need to think about, and that's what we need to talk about in terms of this link between changing the economic system, wealth and power, and building more economic democracy as an intrinsic element of an economy that truly works for us, people and planet. Thank you.
It's true.
Thank you.
No, but it's very true what you say. I mean, we cannot have ecology if we don't have democratic governance of common goods, water, air, forest, oceans, but also companies, enterprises. So please, I will I will give you the floor now, and you might have very interesting things to say because you're head of Just Transition Coordination at IndustriAll Europe. So yes. Both industrial matters and fair transition matters.
So thank you very much for the invitation to this very interesting dialogue and conference. I really enjoyed the first debates that I saw today. Maybe just quickly an introduction of who we are, because maybe not all of you know IndustriAll Europe, and our name maybe sound a bit ambiguous, but we are a trade union federation representing 7 million workers across Europe. So we organize trade unions in 38 countries, so not only the European Union, but also outside, like the Western Balkan countries. We have members in Turkey, in Norway, Switzerland, Iceland. This in industry, heavy industry, metal manufacturing, steel manufacturing, chemicals, but also energy and mining sectors, and also textile sectors. So just to say that the members that we represent are the ones that are facing changes right now. And we, of course, obviously we had a broad discussion, or we are having broad discussions about what the change will mean for the workers. And we decided, or maybe that sounds a bit stupid, but we decided we have to embrace a change. So in our discussions with our members that we had now for a decade, we say we cannot really, we do not want to prevent a change, we need a change. And it's the role of trade unions, and it has been the role of trade unions over the last century to actually manage a change and anticipate transitions. And this is what we are doing in dialogue with our members across Europe, basically. However, what we are seeing at the moment, the situation is that we are finding ourselves in a poly-crisis, especially after the invasion of Russia into Ukraine. We have seen a dramatic cost of living crisis, dramatic inflation hitting working people, not only working people, everyone in society. Yeah, so the energy crisis has an impact on industrial jobs. Some industries being forced to shut down business. So this is all what we are seeing in the context in which we are actually spinning climate policies. And when we look at the EU framework on how to achieve our ambitions, our share of the Paris Agreement, cutting greenhouse gases by 55, at least 55% till 2030. We are now discussing a 2040 target and then reaching climate neutrality by 2050. What we still see, what is really missing is a understanding how it affects working people and the social dimension. It's we have the first elements for a social dimension. We have a Just Transition Fund, so an understanding that there needs to be done something in a different way than in past transitions. We have to also address the social dimension, but it's not comprehensive enough. It's more a reactive tool than something proactive. And therefore, we argue we have to anticipate the changes and we have to manage the changes and we have to bring everyone, every stakeholder back again, and including trade unions. However, what we also see is that trade union rights are under attack and have been under attack during the last decades, and there I confirm, like, neoliberalism is a major problem here. The union, so in the fundamental, in the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union, some of the basic principles is the freedom of association, the freedom of information and consultation of workers in undertakings, and the freedom of collective bargaining, and, if necessary, the freedom and the right to strike. But what we've seen is actually that these rights are under attack, and that especially if you leave it to the market, unions do not have any influence in anticipating the change. And why it's important to have unions is we are defending the quality of work. And that is very important. We are defending wages, we are negotiating wages, but we also defend how you anticipate the changes in companies and how you can actually ensure that the workers within companies have a fair transition to another job in the same company or to another job in a different sector. And this is not really thought through in the Green Deal yet. So, and I think that is a major problem still, and it's increasing also the tensions that we see, and the support of far-right parties in many member states, because workers are losing out. There's social dumping, there's growing precarity, especially also within young populations. It's many young people working in part-time jobs. So how can we embrace a transition if we do not think that about the future, the well-being of future generations? And this is really what we would like to bring in the decade, in this discussion. Sorry. I also agree with you on the industrial policy and what we are the debate that we are currently having on the Green Deal industrial plan, and that we need green jobs. We need green jobs, but these jobs need to be good jobs. And I agree with you. We have to stimulate the creation of a European value chain in green industries. We've seen we are monitoring in some countries where you have investments in batteries, you have investment in offshore renewables, that sometimes those batteries or those offshore installations, they are actually put up with labor that we have to import, because our own people do not want to work under these circumstances, under the labor conditions in the companies. And labor might be more costly here than importing labor from somewhere else. And that is really an issue that we have to address. We have to really ensure that there is again social dialogue, a strengthening of social dialogue, a strengthening of collective bargaining system, and a strengthening of democracy at work, information and consultation that has to be meaningful. And therefore, IndustriAll Europe, and together with the European Trade Union Confederation, we are arguing we need a directive for just transition that strengthens the anticipation and management of change together with stakeholders and together with unions. And here I stop maybe for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I agree with you that the EU Green Deal lacks at the same time a social leg, an industrial leg, and maybe a funding leg as well. You know, ecology is not just about norms, of course. But maybe, Philippe, you're the right person to tell us what you think about all that.
But I like the fact that the word backlash is being used, because indeed we are witnessing a backlash, and I have the chance of speaking as last one in the panel, so that allows me a bit to react to some of the things that have been said. Yes, we are facing a massive change, and change never comes easily. And the first thing I would say, Neil, I agree that we need a more bottom-up approach. Indeed, when we see communities taking ownership, indeed change happens sometimes more easily than when it is imposed top-down. But I don't agree that this is the entire story. I do believe that since we are talking about system change, you have to work both bottom-up and top-down. And I don't want to oppose the two dimensions or the two axes. Because yes, you need more empowerment, you need more innovation from the ground up. And indeed, you don't want statism there, in the sense that basically we are preventing initiatives being taken. But on the other hand, some issues really require systemic action from the top. And indeed, we don't have a global government. The next best that we have in Europe is the European Union, because at least there we have scale. Now, why do we have backlash? Because as you indicated, Neil, well, the current system is working. It is the current economic system delivers what it is meant to deliver. That is endless increase and, I would add, concentration of profit without any consideration. Well, this is all predicated on boundless exploitation of the planet we live on, of life forms other than human, and I would even say of exploitation, at least partly, of humans. It works. So those people who say, well, it's in crisis, I'm not sure. I've witnessed since I was an adult, well, almost continuous economic growth. There's no question about that. The world as a collective is wealthier if you measure it by GDP than it was 40 years ago. But one other thing is also certain, is that the ownership of that wealth and the benefits of economic growth have become more unequal. Now, people will argue that indeed parts of the world, China, the Middle East, etc., have developed, and the living standards in those countries are higher today than they were 40 years ago. On average, absolutely no question about that. But we are actually witnessing is that if, on the face of it, we have less unequal distribution geographically, if you look at it from a perspective of, percentiles of wealth, then Piketty is very clear, you have concentration at the top. That is clear. So the system delivers that. Now, it could deliver something else, but it delivers that. And that, to me, is the first reason of the backlash. The backlash is, well, because the system works, changing the system makes the beneficiaries of this system resist. And there's a lot of pressure, indeed, coming from certain sides of the economic system, especially those who benefit most, stand to lose from a transformation of the system. So am I surprised that there's resistance from those sides? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But you might say, well, if we are just speaking in symbolic terms, well, the top 1% are just 1%, so they can't possibly win elections, can they? Well, they can. Because indeed they leverage, well, a significant chunk of society that sees the potential to lose even more by the transformation. And that is indeed what they leverage in terms of backlash. I never have people speaking more about the Gilets jaunes in France than the business federations. This is where I hear the most spoken about the Gilets jaunes. Oh, beware! If you do all this, you will have the Gilets jaunes. Well, if we do all this by this, I mean strict environmental legislation without deep changes in our, as you said, pre- and redistribution systems, then indeed it's again going to be the weakest in society ending up making the bulk of the effort. And of course they resent that. I will never forget my discussions with some of the Gilets jaunes back in 2018. They were absolutely aware of environmental destruction, but they said, okay, we've been screwed by most economic reforms, my language, but they meant unemployment regulations, so labor market regulation, tax regulations, etc. We've been screwed, at that time, we've been screwed by the financial crisis, we've been screwed by the Eurozone crisis, and now you want to screw, we've been screwed by COVID measures, and now we are going to be screwed by the green transformation. We've had enough of it. And there's a risk there, and then let me just say that we have a major agency problem, in the sense that I'm speaking from the European Union perspective. If you look at environmental legislation, the bulk of it is responsibility of the European Union. And make no mistake about that, if you produce goods and services in a socially and environmentally sustainable way, they will be more expensive. If it were the opposite, the entire economy would go there. No, if the economy goes in an unsustainable way in environmental and social terms, it's because it gives more profit opportunity. As simple as that. Yeah, short term, but it works short term. I've worked 22 years in business. Believe me, the horizon that we were targeting was a quarter, right? So when people told me, you're becoming a politician after having been a manager in the private sector, so this is the world of short-termism, I said, you're kidding. I mean, at least I have to look at the next election, and that's 5 years away. That's not the next quarter, you know? What I mean here is that indeed goods and services will become more expensive. And the question is, how do you make them affordable for everyone and not just for the happy few? And that calls for massive transformation of our taxation system, national competence, social security system, national competence, public services, national, regional, local competencies. And there you have a disconnect, because indeed the European Green Deal was launched at European level. And frankly speaking, when von der Leyen launched it, she did not get a mandate from the 27 heads of states and government to do it. Neither did she get a mandate from the majority of the European Parliament that voted for her, and my group voted against her, to do it. She didn't have a mandate, yet she did it. But I'm telling you that just to highlight the fact that actually there was no real appetite for a European Green Deal. Certainly not from the member states. Now, why would these people who never wanted the Green Deal in the first place then enact the reforms on the ground, taxation, social security, labor market organization, all the rest of it, if actually they don't see the need for the European Green Deal in the first place? There's no motivation. And there lies the biggest risk of the success of the backlash against European Green Deal. Unless there's a common understanding that, yes, we need to make our economies fit the planetary boundaries, at least do what we can at European level to make it happen, and that entails massive changes in the way we structure the things that I mentioned. Unless there's a common understanding that we need to do that, the backlash will win. Because indeed, people will say, okay, I care about the planet, but actually I need to live now. And yes, I know that not making the green transformation will hurt the future, but I'm already hurt now. And therefore, I will vote for parties that tell me, don't worry, we will not enact big changes, and we wait for a technological miracle for it to solve the equation. I'm not a trained economist. I minored in economy, but my major is in engineering. So I know a bit about thermodynamics. And I know that endless growth in a materially finite world is just a physical impossibility. And unless we take that into account in policy making, we won't be successful. But taking it into account without caring for distribution of opportunities and of real outcomes, not just opportunities, is bound to fail.
Thank you very much, Philippe. It's true that the backlash has a psychological dimension. Because a lot of people, when we say we're all going to die, the world is going to be a mess, etc., there is a natural, aspect of the mind to go towards people who will tell you there is no problem, climate denialism, right? And a lot of people from the right and the far right say there is no problem because we'll find a technological solution, as you just said, or global warming does not exist, it has always been through the history, etc. And you have also a cultural aspect to this backlash, in my view, with people saying they want to attack your way of life, your fossil fuel car, your barbecue, etc., etc. And it's about the Gilets jaunes thing as well, which is very strong, this identity, aspect of the backlash, this cultural aspect of the backlash.
Can I just react to that? Because I would agree with Jacek Rostowski when he said, well, that basically I'm blaming neoliberals not for bad outcomes, but for paving the way to national populism. But I have to then, as a return, say that maybe we Greens have also a share of responsibility in the backlash, because when we appear on the cultural side to point fingers, you eat meat, you're a bad person, you don't drive a bike, you're a bad person. Maybe we don't say it as bluntly, but everything in the way we say it and in what we say hints at that, then we have a responsibility, as if we are waging a war against the ordinary human beings. You know, I'm not saying you must change, Mrs. in yellow. I say we need to change, and change is difficult. You know, when I left IBM and I became a member of the European Parliament, I had a company car. And the company car is really a scandal in social terms, in taxation terms, in environmental terms. I know this. I'm a green. Do you think I was happy handing over the keys of my company car? No. Because me too, I'm a human being, I hate change. And we Greens have been maybe too much lecturing. Society is, you need to change, you are sinners, you know? Actually, it's a collective challenge and we are part of it. Exactly. We are part of it.
We'll take questions now if you have some.
Before you think of oh, there's a question coming. Sorry, this is a good debate here. The people speak.
Less of a question, more of a comment, because we also have another aspect of climate denialism right now, and it's called why EU should change with its 7 or 10% of global emissions if China is not doing anything, if US is not doing anything. Of course, this is based on very many false premises, because it compares planned EU policy with badly perceived things that are going on in China, that are going on in the US. There are also some moral obligations and so on and so forth. But we also should be wary of this aspect. That's one thing. Second thing is we had a less discussion about the external EU policy, for example, in the context of COP28 that's coming soon, and how the EU essentially should behave during this conference. Thank you.
Can I come in very quickly, Chloé? I think COP28 is a sign of how badly we've fallen. Let's be under no illusions, that's not going to deliver. I think just taking your question and thoughts and linking to what was previously said by Philippe, is that we have a problem of the imagination, in that we imagine a future but we base it on the past. There's a kind of linearity, I don't know what the word in French or German is, but prefigurative. You kind of see the future, but your only reference points are kind of what the past has been. But this is such a huge system change thing. I don't believe we can really learn much from the past, our institutions, our linearity. Now, I come from a policy perspective, but also a deeply activist one. And I believe the change will actually come, right, from different places than in power, than from the vertical power we have at the moment. It will come from ordinary people and workers saying enough is enough and doing things differently. Now, Roberto Unger, who's a Brazilian philosopher politician, he says this moment we're in is a moment where we need to experiment like mad, and they foreshadow the bigger change. We don't know what that change, what it will look like in organizational terms and democratic terms, but we need to enhance and amplify the experiments. So I see this as that is deeply progressive. That is kind of saying the game's off with capitalism, socialism, the auspice of democracy. We need to actually start to build afresh. And there is stuff out there and there's people out there doing things. We need to experiment like mad, get them to grow, and they foreshadow the bigger change. And power, and I work with power, administrations across the world, vertical power, democratic power needs to make the conditions by which those experiments can actually start to grow. There's community land trusts, there's worker ownership, there's cooperatives. Across the world, there's all those things that are seen as like fluffy, nice alternatives. They are the new mainstream, and we need to make them the mainstream. And we've got a battle like never before in our hands. So I do think in the imagination, people in the EU and the government, we need to stop thinking that we have the fix and vertical power can actually make those changes. We actually need to look through the other lens here and look at the stuff that's happening and amplify that. Deeply radical and deeply transformative. And I think it's the only way.
Yeah. I just wanted to answer to your first remark. Why should we Europeans, who only represent maybe 15% of the global GDP and 6%, I mean the European Union population, so including the UK, maybe it's closer to 6, 7, 8% of the population, do more? I would see three arguments. First, it's a usual prisoner's dilemma. If there's no action, we all die. So I would say that in itself is enough for me to say we have to do our part. There's a moral aspect to this, is actually the West has a disproportionate responsibility in environmental destruction. As Imam Mogra said, it's true that 20% of the global population lived off the rest, right? So morally, it's only fair that we are doing an outsized part of the effort. But then, if the first two arguments don't convince you, then I'm speaking in terms of economic opportunity. And okay, Europe is indeed a tiny part, well, the European Union is a tiny part of the global population. We are going economically, in any case, to continue depending from the rest of the world because we live on 2% of the land. And actually, we have few resources, and thinking that we can be an island totally independent from the rest of the world is crazy. So what is it that we have to offer to the rest of the world in exchange? You might say, well, this is a nice place that everyone wants to visit, so let's focus on tourism. Yeah, well, and there I'm turning to IndustriAll. Well, you know, tourism is a very nice activity, but it's low added value, and you don't have high living standards on low added value activities. So you need more. And there, to me, I'm convinced that the next industrial revolution is a green one. And the question that we have to answer as Europeans is, do we want to be among the leaders or among the followers? If not, the also-rans. And to me, the warning sign is the European car industry. Because of a rent-extracting mentality, that is, let's extract the diesel rent as long as we can. We left the doors, well, they left the doors entirely open to newcomers like Tesla, like BYD, to seize the new wave of the automobile industry. And they are not Europeans. Complacency, because indeed leading means rolling up our sleeves and investing, making efforts. And what is a big adversary to us in Europe is, I would say, a quite pervasive mentality of entitlement and ownership. Well, basically, we're wealthy and we deserve it. No, we have to roll up our sleeves to earn it. And indeed, to me, the only game in town for Europe is to lead in the green transition, to be among the leaders, because we won't be the leaders. But we can be among the leaders if we go for it. And so, if you don't do it out of altruism, do it because it makes perfect economic sense to do it.
Yeah, so I fully agree. I think we should be leaders, and there's a huge potential on being the leader and creating those green jobs. But we should also at the same time be leaders in terms of the social ambition and rights, trade union rights. Paradoxically, when looking over the Atlantic, it was the Biden administration that, with the Inflation Reduction Act, tied social conditionality to clean tech manufacturing. And this is now what we are saying at the European level. Well, the European Union is now reacting with the Green Deal industrial plan, but where is actually this social conditionality? And also more like, there should be no blank checks to companies who benefit from funding, from tax breaks, from any form of social, public support. So actually, and this is where I want to round up. We should be leaders, also in terms of the social conditions, labor rights, and making the quality of work really count again. And I think this is how you gain also the support, the right support across the society among workers. And here I finalize. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is a very vast issue we discussed today, and I just want to conclude that if we are not on track towards ecology, if we are not meeting our objectives, it is not a problem of science. We know the facts. It is not a problem of technique, because we know how to make renewable energy, circular industry. It is neither a problem of money. It is a matter of justice. And it is about countering the opposition of the top 1% who has no interest in the ecological bifurcation, but also all the people who benefit from the present situation, authoritarian regime, etc., at the expense of the vast majority of humanity. So it is about justice in the end. And I thank you very much for your attention and for your participation.
Thank you so much, Chloé. Thank you, Philippe. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Corinna.